everyone. Hope everyone is doing super well today. Goodness gracious, it has been a busy day. So, as the music's winding down here, hello there, my name is Loremaster of Sotek. If you've never seen me before and have no idea who I am a YouTube streamer that does Total War Warhammer content, which is the game we're going to be doing today as we are doing a tournament. This is a tournament of Total War Warhammer 2, though I run it. There was a tournament yesterday hosted by some friends of mine, Italian Spartacus and Turin, though I'm doing a tournament similar to theirs, but with a little bit of a different style. So, in my tournament, as opposed to the norm where players fight each other over multiple matches and they're trying to outplay each other by picking factions that are good against each other and having all sorts of crazy strategies and stuff like that, instead, I invite my players to experience what it was like to play the game during its tabletop era, Warhammer Fantasy that is. And so I have them send their lists to me in advance, so they get to pick their full army in advance, bring it to the table, and they don't know what maps they're playing on, they don't know who their opponent is, what faction their opponent's bringing, so they have to make a list that's designed to fight anybody and everybody. And then all the games are best of one. So this is a pretty brief tournament series. The whole thing will probably take us about 2 hours based on the norm, and we're going to have fun with it. So, once again, my name is Loremaster of Sotek. You can check me out on YouTube. I could have the face cam on, but I'm not going to bother. I'm just going to let y'all enjoy seeing the game. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Our first game here is going to be between two excellent players. All the players we have today are pretty excellent. But we have Lizardmen going up against Dark Elves. And we've got, over here, we've got Falcon, who is, of course, one of the most famous players in the multiplayer community right now at the Last Ever Chosen, which is a really big, it's kind of like a quarterly tournament. At least so far we've done it roughly quarterly. But it's a really, really big tournament series where we kind of get some of the biggest and best players together to hash it out over 2 days of hardcore competitive play. And Falcon was, of course, in the finals in the Last Ever Chosen. So let's go ahead and take a look at his list here. So we've got a unit of Col 1 Riders. Looks like we've got 2 units, in fact. Then we've also got a Bastillodon with the Ark of Sotek, which can, of course, pump out lots of poison attacks and snakes, which is going to debuff enemy units. Then it looks like we've got 5 units of red-crested skinks with their big old great mauls. Then we've got, looks like 3 units of skink cohorts with javelins. And then a unit of salamander hunting packs. 2 units of Croxagors, a skink priest of heavens, and then leading the army is, of course, my favorite character and my namesake, Tenant Juan, the Prophet of Sotek, who is riding on his ancient Stegodon with the engine of the gods. And then over here we have Hadries, who is leading the Dark Elves, and he's got a unit of Col 1 Knights with a chevron. We've got 3 units of Dark 1 Riders with repeater crossbows for some nice harassment action. 2 units of Dread Spears for that sweet anti-large. 2 units of Bleak Swords, some Sisters of Singing Doom, Witch Elves, of course. Then we've got the Regiment of Renown Hydra, the Chill of Sontar with his icy attacks and breath. And finally, we've got Morathi leading the army on foot. And it looks like for spells, we've got Soul Blight, Soul Stealer. She's also got her wand with her, and she's got Power of Darkness. So she's got all of her magic items, and is going to be able to rain magic down from above. And then last but not least, we have a Death Hag on top of a Cauldron of Blood, who's got all of her, she does have the Chill Blade, which is going to be, of course, debuffing nearby enemies. And then she has all of her buffs. And, oh, I almost missed this guy. We have an Assassin. Pretty popular pick in recent times. He's got the Web of Shadows and the Assassin's Trophy, so he'll be able to debuff enemy characters and, of course, throw a net at one of them, which could be pretty deadly. So without further ado, let's get into it. So we'll go ahead and let the players know that they're good to start. And it is go time. Oh, did it go through? There we go. Alright. And everyone out there, I hope you're having a pleasant day. I'm very excited to be here. I've been a very large Warhammer fan for as long as I've been around, at least. I think I started playing Warhammer Fantasy Tabletop back in, oh gosh, I think I was 9 years old when I started collecting models and playing the game, and I'm 28 now. 27, there we go, 27. So it's been almost 20 years for me, so being able to enjoy it in a 3D format like this is just spectacular. So here we do have some early skirmish fire going down, the repeater crossbows firing and exchanging fire, quite literally, with the salamanders. Salamanders actually did not come out very favorably in that trade, so it looks like they're starting to try and pull back behind the skink cohorts with javelins, who are of course shielded, and they will exchange much, much better with their poison javelins, which are going to come in here and probably do some pretty substantial damage to these riders, as they're going to be slowing them while also doing pretty considerable damage. The Dark Elf army looks like they're kind of content to just sit back and try and let their ranged troops get a little bit of early damage in, especially on units like these Cold One Riders. But of course, they're not going to be able to do this for super long, because although the Skinks don't have a ton of ammo, because they're kind of a hybrid melee ranged unit, so they use a lot of their ammo very quickly, and then are pretty much used for range. They do trade quite favorably with low armor units, but the Chill of Sontar does fire off a brutal ice breath that just leaves a ton of skinks dead in this dry desert heat. And it looks like the armies are about to smash together here in a moment. Ten Juan does move a little bit forward on his Ancient Stegodon, but the Dark Elves are still holding back. Here we do have the initial charges going down. We have Red-Crested Skinks going into these Dread Spears, which are of course going to just brutalize each other. They're both fairly low armored units. Oh, really, really nice breath wave coming in from these Salamanders that just tears those Dark Riders apart. And then over here we're going to have a beautiful charge of these Skinks smashed in with these Croxagors, who thankfully, being buoyed by the Skinks, are going to do really, really well in that fight, as the Skinks do poison damage to debuff those Bleak Swords, and the Croxagors are just going to tear them apart. Meanwhile, we see all of the big units coming into battle, and it looks like Tenenjuan's going to fire off his burning alignment here. So up it goes, and here it comes. So giant space laser going across the field from the dinosaurs. Meanwhile, over here, the Chill of Sontar is battling against the Skinks and the Croxagors. The laser beam does exactly what it's supposed to do, doing a fair amount of damage to the Bleak Swords, but unfortunately, it's not quite enough to overwhelm. And oh, here we see that Tenenjuan has actually been caught out by the Sisters of Singing Doom over here. These little, mostly naked elves are able to rampage units, basically making them go crazy with anger. And so he's kind of stuck in here fighting, and he's surrounded by Cold One Knights, who are of course an anti-large unit who will do a ton of damage to him. And he's also eating so many crossbows. This is really dangerous, and we see Falcon responds the moment he realizes what's happening, and all of his troops come swarming into this massive fight, and are doing everything they can to alleviate the pressure off Tenenjuan and get him out of there. Which Tenenjuan does manage to rally and gets a beautiful cast of Focus Instincts, which is of course an AoE ability that stops Rampage, which is actually what the Witch Elves cause. When the Witch Elves are poisoning you with their blades to make you get angry and you lose control of the units, what they're doing is they're causing you to rampage. So they're actually naturally countered by Tenenjuan, who of course AoE can cancel that out. So as long as his Focus Instincts is active, none of his units can be rampaged. The balance of power is still even between these two forces, and a really, really nice charge coming in from the Stegodon, just punting Dark Elves across the battlefield, and some really nice arcing shots from the Salamanders coming in on the Chill of Sontar, which is of course going to do some considerable damage, since it's a large unit and also isn't significantly armored. It only has 60 armor, which in the grand scheme of things is pretty low. We see the Ark of Sotek is trying to kind of hold steady. Lots of Skinks are charging in here now. The Dark Elves are getting surrounded on all sides, but they do have fairly superior troops, and we can see that in that both of the Dark Elf units, Cold One units, excuse me, have been seen off. One of them is completely shattered, so they're gone and absolutely not coming back. However, at this point, the Dark Elves are completely surrounded. The Salamanders are continuously raining in fire on this War Hydra, which of course is regenerating health constantly, but I don't think it's going to be enough to survive it through this just constant barrage of fireballs. We see that Tenenjuan here gets hit by another Assassin's Trophy from the Assassin, lowering his ability to hit and block melee attacks But he does get off some really nice charges despite that, trying to protect the salamanders as they are doing everything in their power to kill the Chill of Sontar. The balance of power has actually started to go in the favor of the Dark Elves, and they're starting to claim the advantage as those Witch Elves are getting such good mileage. Here we see they do manage to cause the Salamanders to rampage into Dark Elf Spears, which is not a good matchup for them. They are not the best at fighting. Another Space Laser does go down here trying to get the Dark Riders, but unfortunately it's not quite able to connect with them. And Tenhuan is getting really, really low health. He only has about 650 health left. Morathy over here, the Dark Elf General, is still in fairly good health. The Lizardman army, though, overall is in much, much better shape. As long as they can keep Tenhuan away from these Dark Riders, there is a good chance they can turn this in their favor. And the main reason for that is because the Chill of Sontar has broken. He does get his, if one head falls, another takes its place ability, so he's regenerating health massively right now. So he's almost back up to half health. But because he's already broken and fleeing, as long as these skinks continue to pursue him and they're not interrupted by, say, these Dark Riders, this Hydra will not rally. And we see that Hadri's does notice that, and he's going to charge in his Dark Riders here to knock around these skinks and try and get them off the Hydra so that hopefully it can rally and bolster the Dark Elf lines again. Meanwhile, over here, we do see that Morathy is surrounded by Salamanders who are starting to fire into the Death Hag. The Ark of Sotek is coming in now against the K9 Assassin. And, oh, I missed it earlier, but Tenhuan has fallen. He is dead. The Ancient Stegodon is broken on the ground, and that explains why the balance of power is so significantly in favor of the Dark Elves at this point. And we do see the Ark of Sotek comes in here and uses his blessing to cause a horde of snakes to come out. And at this point, the Lizardmen are doing everything in their power to kill Morathy, but, oh, she uses the wand, and it brings down the Bastiladon there. So the Lizardmen don't have any heavy hitters left. Meanwhile, the Chill of Sontar was saved by that excellent Dark Rider charge. And he is just waddling back into the fray. And I really don't think there's anything left that the Lizardmen could do at this point. There's still a ton of cav units riding around. Charging units in the rear just doing tons of damage. The Kroxigors are pretty much the only significant units left. But they are not going to stand a chance against something like that Hydra. There's just so many Dark Elf units left now, running around the battlefield dominating. Although the Lizardmen have a lot of troops left, they're very low tier troops, being these skinks. They took a very wide army with a lot of massive skink units and stuff, but ultimately it seems that Hadri's was able to pull off a significant play early on, using his Witch Elves to trap Tenhuan and then getting off a massive charge, doing a ton of damage to the Lizardman General, which ultimately led to his death. And yeah, that pretty much is gonna do it. So victory does go to the Dark Elves, and Hadri's pulls it out against Falcon, who is, of course, a very, very good player, even though he was taking a little bit of a meme build, being the Horde of Sotek. He, of course, didn't have any Saurus units outside of just the Kolwan Riders. And ultimately, it seems like the superior troops of the Dark Elves came out on top. The Death Hag, the Assassin, and Morathy got a significant amount of kills. The Hydra performed really well, and of course the Dark Riders, although they lost kind of those early game skirmishes, managed to stay alive until the end game and just got a ton of work in. So a really good game by both players. The Lizardmen have the superior numbers, but of course the Dark Elves brought the significant skill. So that's going to be game one. So great game to both those players. So let's go ahead and advance the roster as appropriate. I'm so sad the Lizardmen lost. So we've got Hadri's moving on to the quarterfinals. Because as I said, this is a best of one series. Just like when you would show up to play tabletop at your local store. You get one shot, that's it. Outside of that, let's make sure to pop a message over to King of the Dead that he's up. And as you can see here, we've got Outer Region going up against King of the Dead for our next match. So let's go ahead and get everything situated. And the next map we're going to is the Pillar of Bone. So we're going from the desert lands of the Tomb Kings. And now we're going to the wastelands of the Greenskins, over in the Badlands. We've got the Pillar of Bone. There it is. Alright, and we've got Beastmen versus the Vampire Coast. So without further ado, let's hop into it. King of the Dead is, of course, another very, very popular and skilled player in the multiplayer scene. Though he has participated in a number of my tournaments before. Which, my tournament tends to be more for fun and kind of seeing what kind of crazy ideas people could kind of come up with that wouldn't work in the usual meta. Because typically the way it works is when you show up into a match, you and your opponent go into a lobby, and usually there's a system for one of the players picks their faction, and then the other player gets to pick a counter faction, and perhaps there's like a ban list. So you'll pick an army, you say, okay, I'm going to play Lizardmen, and then as your opponent's picking, you say, but I'll ban Dark Elves. So he can pick any army that's not Dark Elves. And you trade off to, so there's kind of some mind games and preparation and trying to get ideal matchups and things like that. This format obviously doesn't allow for that, because we just kind of cut straight to the quick of you just pick your favorite faction, pick an army you really like, and hop in. So hopefully we'll get the players in just a few seconds, and we'll be set to go. Let me check to see. Of course, you can catch us either on Steam, which is where I'm sure a fair number of people are watching, or on the Twitch page for the Skulls for the Skull Throne, which is just the Skull Throne Twitch page. So hopefully it won't be too much longer before we get everybody in here. Could be that we're having a little bit of delay with Steam, but here they come. Awesome. All right, so let's hop on into it. So let's start with King of the Dead and his Vampire Coast, which are of course very, very powerful faction. They did get slapped with a few nerfs in the most recent patch, so they kind of deserved it. But let's see what we've got here. So we've got 5 units of zombie pirate deckhand mobs. So just a nice front line. It's basically just a meat shield. Then we've got 2 units of rotting Prometheans, which are these big ol' undead crabs. We've got a couple units of zombie pirate deckhand mobs with halberds, which are better designed to deal with cavalry and other large creatures. Then we've got a couple units of scurvy dogs, the undead hounds that are excellent for running down ranged units and getting enemy back lines. Excuse me, we got 4 units of halberds. I only saw 2 there for a moment. Then, we got a regiment of renown here. We got the Gallows Giant, which is, of course, the giant animated construct that's got a couple of zombies on it, but it's got a massive flamethrower for an arm. And leading the army is Count Noctilus, one of the vampire admirals himself. And it looks like he's got his usual build of healing magic, summons, and Wraith Storm. And then for a hero, though, he does have the Mourngull Haunter, the giant undead behemoth creature that's very good at killing enemy units and assassinating characters. Meanwhile, on the Beastmen side, for the animalistic children of Kaos, we've got, looks like, 3 units of Ungor Spearman Herd. We've got a regiment of renown here, the Blackhorns Ravagers, with their specialized weapons in dark fur. Leading them is Morgur the Shadow Gave, one of the Corruptor himself, who of course has regeneration, can summon Chaos Spawn, and can turn enemy units into Chaos Spawn when they reach low enough health. Corex Man Rippers, which are the Regiment of Renown Bestigors, which are the most elite troop type available to the Beastmen. And then we've got one of my favorite regiments of renown, the Eye of Morslib, a Cygor who hurls giant magical boulders through the air. And then the Butchers of Kalkengrad, the regenerating cowhide Minotaurs, who are of course ready to get into it. We have a Bray Shaman of Death over here with Spirit Leech and Fate of Biuna. And then last, we've got Living Dogs. We've got a unit of Chaos Warhounds and a unit of Chaos Warhounds with Poison off to the flank. And then, of course, a normal Beastman staple, Centaurs. Looks like all of them have throwing axes. So this is kind of your heavy morass armor-piercing unit. And without further ado, let's begin. And see who will bring skulls for corn. Alright, so the battle begins. And, of course, the Beastmen do have the advantage here in the early game, as the Cygor does have excellent long range. But unfortunately, he threw where the dogs were standing, and they managed to avoid it. The Centaurs here do pop out from cover and are beelining towards the enemy. But it looks like another boulder is going to be going further back. And boom! Nice. Killed 14 zombies instantly. Really, really nice. Okay, so the Beastmen have sprung from all angles. They have probably noticed by now that the Vampire Coast do not have any long-range shooting. The closest thing they have to long-range shooting is, of course, the Gallows Giant, who is probably more of a medium-range unit, though he does do significant damage with his, well, you'll see. But, the Cygor, of course, is basically an artillery piece that's quite capable of defending itself in close combat. And Cygor's actually got a substantial buff in the most recent patch. But the Vampire Coast is hurtling, well, hurtling as fast as zombies can anyway, towards the front line while they continue to get harassed. We do see Morger does run up a bit here, but he does need to be kind of careful because he has regeneration, he is very weak to fire damage. Though he has very, very high missile resistance due to a natural chaotic aura he has, so he'll mitigate 75% of the damage. And we do see the reason he ran forward is so he could summon Kaos spawn. These hideous, ugly creatures that he pops out of the ground. They have poison attacks, so they debuff and slow enemies. So they are just going to chase the Gallows Giant while he's going to be eating a ton of armor-piercing throwing axes in the back. And he is taking significant damage already. So the Chaos spawn, they're of course a summoned unit, so they'll just fight till they drop. And they're unbreakable, so they really, really don't care until that timer in that itty-bitty bottom left thing you can see down here. If I can get it. Maybe. Down here, there it is. When this runs out, they will just instantly die. That being said, they do run into some halberds who are naturally geared against them, though they'll probably deal with that with minor issue. We do see that the Morgul has officially committed itself to the fight and is smashing into some dogs. And because he causes terror, the dogs pretty much instantly run away, fleeing for their lives, as I'm sure anyone would when faced with such a monstrosity. And we see that the Gallows Giant is kind of having a hard time landing blows. Pretty much every unit he's trying to shoot has started moving in a direction that they previously weren't, or basically running out of range. And kind of the tricky thing about his Flamethrower is he needs to be hitting a target that doesn't move out of range while he's firing. So here you see that the Chaos Spawn did run out of time, so they just kind of drop on their faces when the timer holding them together fell out. But they did manage to take a unit of zombies with them, so that's pretty spectacular. Over here, we do see that the Eye of Morslib is about halfway through his ammunition, though he has almost guaranteed 100 free kills, basically just sitting back doing what he does best. Gallows Giant's kind of having a hard time today. Meanwhile, over here, we do see a Fated Biuna coming down on these Rotting Prometheans, which is going to do significant damage to them. I actually think a Spirit Leech might be a little better, because Fated Biuna is kind of a spell that the more entities a unit has, kind of the more damage it does, though it does a significant amount of damage no matter what. Meanwhile, Spirit Leech is better designed against individual targets. Around here, we do see that the Beastmen front line is starting to engage against the Vampire Coast. Vampire Coast have been kind of trying to take advantage of the Gallows Giant, but he's kind of not firing for some reason. Could be a small bug, but we'll see here. Oh, there he goes. So he shoots that time. You can see it actually did a pretty substantial amount of damage for the little spurt of flame. He kind of shoots these just highly concentrated blasts. Ah, there he goes. Now he's doing it. But in any event, the Beastmen are coming around the back of the Vampire Coastline, trying to look for easy places where they can do significant damage. The Cygor is continuing to focus down enemy units that have anti-large. And the reason he's doing that is so that when he does run out of ammunition, he'll be able to, of course, to stray forward and get into the fight himself. Over here, the Morgul Haunter has taken a substantial amount of damage, but Invocation of Nehek does go down from Count Noctilus onto all these units, in addition to a bunch of summons, which is going to be healing all of these units. The Morgul Haunter does also heal while he's in close combat, though he does need to be careful as he's basically being a little bit ganged up on by the Butchers of Kalkengard, who are, of course, a very, very dangerous unit. We see that one of the Vampire Coast units has been transformed into Chaos Spawn at this point, and there's just mayhem all over the battlefield. The Scurvy Dogs are trying to hold off the Centaurs with throwing axes, prevent them from getting into the back line of this army. Meanwhile, the Rotting Prometheans are doing an excellent job just chopping their way through all these Spearmen, because although the Spearmen do anti-large, they have very little to no armor piercing, and Rotting Prometheans are very heavily armored. thanks to those massive shells. Here we do see a Ray Storm go down on the Brave Shaman. It does a little bit of damage, not too much though. That did get a pretty heavy nerf in the most recent patch, as it was just doing a ton of damage. But in any event, we do see more invocations of Nehek being cast, trying to heal the Vampire Coast. But here we actually see a big nerf that came in the most recent patch taking effect. The Vampire Coast are only able to hit a maximum of 4 units when using the upgraded Invocation of Nehek. It used to be they would hit every single unit in the radius, so when they would kind of death blob like they are right now, kind of making a Death Star as it's more commonly known, it would be really, really good for them because they could just heal everybody in it. Now they only heal the 4 most important units, characters and monsters. So like these Rotting Prometheans did not get a taste of that sweet, sweet heals, and you can see that they're actually starting to get pretty close to death. Morgur was getting a little bit wailed on by the Mourngul Haunter, but he's not the best target for that, mainly because Morgur has a natural resistance to shooting attacks and magic attacks. And we can go ahead and catch a little cinematic action here, since we're kind of just watching mass mayhem as all these guys are just... There's just fire and crabs and cows, and it's just an absolute mess. The... oh, not the best shot there, buddy. The bad thing about the Gallows Giant is he's actually very, very good against units that are close to him, but they have to be in kind of particular spots, otherwise he can overshoot. So that's actually a good reason why you want to try and get him in melee sometimes, is he has a very hard time hitting people at his feet sometimes. In any event, the crabs are rallying into this massive fight, trying to overwhelm the Beastmen elite troops. And let's check on how things are going. We do see that the Butchers of Kalkengard are pretty much spent. They still have 6 unit models left, but they have very, very little health, and they're pretty much just completely falling apart. The Blackhorn's Ravengers are not far behind. Some summoned zombies have managed to jump onto the Eye of Morsalib to try and stop it from shooting. You can see him stomping around back there. And meanwhile, the Beastmen infantry are starting to scatter pretty heavily. Morgur the Shadowgave, although he's in okay health, is actually taking really significant damage from the Gallows Giant because it does do fire damage, and he is a regenerating target. So just like the myth of Hercules and the Hydra, targets in Warhammer that have regeneration take significantly more damage when they're being harmed by fire. So we do see, because he's completely surrounded, he does break due to just being in a really, really bad position, and he's now kind of running for the hills. But the Vampire Coast can't really afford to just chase him with impunity. They do need to deal with the Eye of Morsalib, though he is out of ammo now. And of course, there are all these Centaurs with throwing axes that look like... I'm not sure if their priority target is going to be the Zombie Pirate Deckhand mobs or if it's going to be the Gallows Giant. It does look like their main goal is to try and make sure nobody pursues after Morgur, so he of course rallies, which is going to center the Beastmen leadership and make sure that the army doesn't completely rout. So the Beastmen do have a very good leadership structure, still alive and healthy. Noctilus, meanwhile, is still at full health. And Korok's Manrippers have been completely surrounded. These are, of course, very, very high-tier Beastmen infantry. But it doesn't matter how good your infantry is. If they're completely surrounded like this, especially by terror causers and fear causers, sooner or later that's going to get to them like it did for the Korok's Manrippers, and they are going to break and run for it. So they have been broken off. We do see here that the Beastmen are kind of trying to rally around the Eye of Morsalib because he will do significant damage if he gets kind of into a big fight like this. And because he's a big scary monster and has tons and tons of health, he actually is stabilizing the balance of power for the Beastmen and actually has it in favor of the Beastmen. So here we see everything that's left of the Vampire Coast is doing what it usually does, where they have formed a death blob. They kind of all rally together. The Gallows Giant is taking significant damage, though. He has gotten to that pivotal point where he's only half health. So when he's at half health, basically all the zombies that were not crewing him, but were inside him, have abandoned ship. So he basically gets a free summon out of it, and they're running in to support him. But he is taking a ton of throwing axes to the back, which on top of the Spirit Leech he just ate, and the fact that the balance of power is starting to turn rather heavily against the Vampire Coast, and now he's completely surrounded by superior troops, and Morgur the Shadowgave, who does poison, he's slowly but surely starting to fall apart, and it's only a matter of time until this Gallows Giant is just going to be gone. We do see him going kind of for one last big Flamethrower here, which he does hit the Korok's Manrippers, but oh, he's going to get hit with an Invocation of Nehek. So the Vampire Coast are trying to stabilize his health But as you can see, his leadership is kind of minus 27, so he is crumbling significantly despite the healing he's getting in the regeneration. And with that, it's only going to be a matter of time, even with the support from Count Noctilus, as these Centaurs come charging in, dying in the flames. He's going to collapse, the zombies fall off, and he's just going to break apart. So down goes the Necrofex Colossus, and down goes the rest of the Vampire Coast. The only thing left is Count Noctilus, who is, of course, a beast when it comes to melee and defensive fighting. He is, of course, one of the stronger Vampire Lords in the game. But this is a lot of Beastmen. They have both of their characters still, and although he could probably continue this fight for quite some time, the Eye of Morslib is an excellent combatant when it comes to just doing raw damage, especially if he's surrounded by friendlies like this. Every once in a while, he's going to land a hit on Noctilus, despite Noctilus's high melee defense, which kind of manages to mitigate damage for him. And as long as Morgar's alive and sitting back here, the Beastmen will fight to the death. And you can see there his leadership is starting to tick. And when his leadership reaches 0 here in a second, it's at 23 right now, but when it reaches the end, he's going to fall apart. And that's, you know, if he doesn't get hit with a Spirit Leech. And that's going to be pretty much it. And King of the Dead, understandably, goes ahead and hands over the match there. He does a surrender, which makes sense. There was no way he was going to win that. It would have just taken Noctilus a while to die. Noctilus is a very tanky character who just kind of keeps fighting for a while. But great game to Outer Region. Beating Vampire Coast with Beastmen is quite difficult. Granted, the Vampire Coast didn't bring a lot of guns. If they had had a couple handguns, they probably would have been they would have been much better situated to deal with the massive amount of Centaurs. But on the flip side, they would have been much poorer equipped to deal with some of these really elite infantry units, with the Cygor, the Eye of Morslib crushing it with 243 kills. So I'm really digging some of the meme builds I'm seeing today from King of the Dead and Falcon. Even if it bit him in the butt a little bit, it's what makes this tournament series really, really fun. So with that, we are done with Game 2, and we are on to Game 3. After I update the roster, because that's the important bit, isn't it? So, we've got Outer Region. If I can find him. There we go. Moving on to the semis, where he will fight Hadri's Dark Elves. And a nice, classic matchup in Chill Naggaroth. But before that, we've got Mr. Igitsk versus Sarmatian. So let me check on the players here. Make sure everybody's all good. And of course, we've got to move the map. Where are we going for this battle? All right, it's time to go from the Pillar of Bone in the Badlands to Sylvania, the land of the vampire counts, a bleary, swampy, gross, undead realm, where we're going to have the Wood Elves, led by Sarmatian, versus the Norskins, led by Mr. Igitsk. Let's check the Twitch chat here. See how everybody's doing. Looks like people are enjoying themselves. Hello, everyone. Oh, and before I forget, let's move the roster out of the way, because otherwise I will forget, and then it'll just be there the entire time. That has happened before, and it's really sad when it does. If there's any typical Total War fans in the chat, would love to know who y'all think's going to win. I already see someone saying Team Talaxlan. Soothsayer is, of course, in the next match, and he is kind of the most famous, I would say, multiplayer person, as he has won a significant amount of games. Yes. Yeah, the maps are not at all thematic. That is correct. And for anyone curious about how I determine the matchups, I don't. I literally pull out my dice and I randomize them. because that's easier, and then no one can blame me if they get a bad matchup. But in any event, just a reminder, in case you're on Steam and you're like, what the heck's going on? My name is Loremaster of Sotek. I am a YouTuber that I play pretty much anything Games Workshop, but I also play a lot of Total War games. This is, of course, the healthy marriage of the two, Total War Warhammer, which is a trilogy of games. We're currently in the second game, Total War Warhammer 2, that has all of your favorite fantasy races, well, most of them so far, from the Warhammer Fantasy universe. And we are having what I like to call my Challenge of the Old Ones tournament, where players basically get to pick their race roster in advance without knowing who their opponent is, what map they're playing on, or any of that other nonsense. And they have to bring a tournament legal build where they show up and play their hardest with a list they designed to enjoy. Some people like to go really meme with it and take lists that are very thematic and fun. Some players tend to go a little more hardcore. Just whatever you want to do, as long as it's tourney legal, as they say. Which, of course, if you want to learn more about the tournament world of Total War Warhammer 2, I would recommend checking out my YouTube channel, or, of course, other YouTubers who are big on the tourney multiplayer scene, like Turin. But in any event, let's go ahead and take a look at the rosters. So first, we've got Sarmatian here with his Wood Elves. We've got a unit of Wild Riders here, probably one of the cooler units in my opinion, of the Wood Elves with their battle stags ready to go. We've got, looks like 5 units of Eternal Guard. Nice, reliable Spearmen. We've got 2 units of Glade Guard with Hagbane tips, which do magic and poison damage. Then we've got Starfire Shafts here, which do fire damage. We've got a unit of War Dancers here in the back line, ready to move to the front and kick some ass if need be. We've got a couple of units of, looks like 1 right now, a unit of Dryads, which are, of course, Tree Spirits. The army is led by Orion, the King in the Wood. And then, oh, almost missed this, guys. We've got 2 units of Glade Guard, both with Hagbane tips, so they also do magic and poison damage. It looks like there's another unit of Wild Riders hiding back there in the forest. Meanwhile, over on Mr. Igik's side, we've got the Norskins, the barbaric Northmen. So we've got, looks like 1, 2, 3 units of Marauder Berserkers, which are, of course, fairly medium-tier infantry that are really designed to get in the fight and just hold the line. We've got 2 units of Thimir Warriors with great weapons. Really, really nasty unit with magic damage, very high missile resistance, and are very well armored. We've got 2 units of Marauder Spearmen. Looks like 3 units of Marauders that, of course, have shields that make them better designed to deal with missile fire. 2 units of Marauder Chariots with their spiked wheels and whips cracking, heading for the battle line. And speaking of the battle line, the Norskins just got slammed. Those Spearmen were not prepared for those Wild Riders, who get a really, really awesome early charge and then immediately book it for the hills. Typical Wood Elf tactics. But they are being pursued very, very quickly by the Beasts of Tashnar, who are Norscan warhounds that have a thirst for large creatures. They tend to tear them apart. Then leading the Norscan line, we've got Throg the Troll King, who is a big regenerating boss of a monster. Does manage to get some early damage in on Orion. He's a very, very good duelist, but he is weak to fire and has very low armor, so these flaming arrows coming in at him are doing a ton of damage. He is backed up by a Shaman Sorcerer of Metal, who's got Final Transmutation as his only spell, and Throg does finally manage to get on these fire archers and is trying to shut them down before they cause him too much grief. But all over the battlefield, we do see the lines meeting. Oh, he's got Searing Doom as well? What the heck? I don't know where that Searing Doom came from. I only see Final Transmutation on this guy, but whatever. Oh, no, that was Orion's bow. That's what that was. Oh, Throg is already broken. So, Throg did try to deal with these archers, but unfortunately, he gets charged in the back by Orion, which that spear in the back does hurt awfully bad. And now he's probably going to get escorted off the battlefield by Wild Riders while eating poison shafts in the back. We do see a Branch Wraith back here, kind of a melee caster hybrid. and things are kind of going crazy all over the battlefield here. There are arrows from the Wood Elves coming in from all directions, but the Beastmen, or the Norskins rather, are now in their element and are going. The longer they fight, the stronger they get with their very, very nasty passive abilities. They basically have a berserk passive where so long as they keep fighting, they get better natural defenses and they get stronger. And you can kind of see that the Wood Elf line has completely collapsed under just the brutal onslaught of Norskin firepower. Throg has shattered by this point, which means he is not coming back. He has left the battlefield, so the Norskins are going to take a significant penalty to their leadership. However, the balance of power is actually swaying in the Norskins' favor, just because they have shattered the elf line with that just overwhelming charge, and now there's just a ton of Norskins circle beating on Orion, the King of the Wood here. He is just getting torn apart. He's trying so hard to get out of there. He even summons his hounds, who are of course going to muck up those troops, but the Fimir are fast enough to keep pace with him, as are the Hounds of Tashnar. And the nasty thing about the Fimir is they do have sundering attacks, which means whenever they hit you, they lower your armor. So they're going to keep pursuing Orion, who is unbreakable, and I believe he does have the Cloak of Aisha. He does. So if he gets too low on health, he will start to basically mass regenerate, at least for a little bit, and gain some serious protections. Meanwhile, we do see that the Norskin chariots are riding around trying to get units off the battlefield, while Orion is heading for the nearest forest, which, based on the name Wood Elves, if you might be able to guess, he does gain natural buffs, as do all Wood Elves when they're fighting in a forest. So as long as he stays in forest terrain, he'll actually get some really nice buffs there. But despite the fact that the initial charge absolutely smashed apart the Wood Elf army, we do see the Wood Elves are now doing what they do best, which is basically skirmish warfare, where they run away while shooting you as much as elvenly possible. So although random pockets of the elves are struggling to be certain, there are parts of the battlefield where they have gained advantage. We do see Orion summon some more arrows using his bow there, but unfortunately everything kind of whiffs. The Beasts of Tashnar do manage to take out and absolutely devour another unit of Wood Elf who had arrows, unfortunately for them. And the Fimir are doing a great job of also trying to run off Wood Elves, while this really healthy archer unit was in a great position, but now they're about to have a really, really bad time. So although Throg is gone, which naturally would put the Wood Elves at the Norskins at a disadvantage, they do still have the Shaman Sorcerer holding them together, which is really, really important. As long as this Shaman Sorcerer is still standing, the Norskins' leadership will remain fairly intact, especially because they have such dominance over the core of the battlefield right now. If Orion can, he probably needs to get at a safe enough range where he can start chucking his spear at that Shaman Sorcerer and try and finish him off. We do see that the Glade Riders are firing off lots and lots of Hagbane tips, and Orion gives a nice poke there to that chariot, absolutely obliterating it, because he, of course, with that massive javelin of his, or spear rather, throwing spear, does have really, really nice bonuses against large units. And there we do see that the Cloak of Aisha has been popped. So as long as this cloak is active, Orion will heal units, and he mitigates about 50% of all damage. The Beasts of Tashnar probably would be capable of doing a significant amount of damage, but they're rather skittish, and they're terrified and run right off the battlefield, so they are gone. Looks like Orion is trying to continue with some kiting here, and manages to just in time get out of range before the Shaman Sorcerer drops his final transmutation spell, which, because the final is with this area of effect, would have done significant damage to Orion, but because Orion managed to run out of the area of effect, he's actually okay. So here looks like he's about to summon his hounds again, which are going to do a ton of damage to these spearmen. Oh, and they get a great angle, because vortex spells like the hounds actually move in a random direction after they're cast. So they actually do a pretty good amount of damage. They do magic damage, so they get through the physical resistance that Norskins get the longer they fight. And it looks like Orion at this point is trying to get rid of these chariots, because the chariots are the only really fast-moving thing left on the Norskin line. We do see this chariot has had enough of being terrorized by Orion, and he is going to run right off the battlefield. At this point, though, the balance of power is significantly against the Wood Elves, though they have rallied a fair bit around their king. We do see some of the ranged units are trying to deal with the last unit of Marauder chariots over there, while Orion, being unbreakable and regenerating, is basically just going to kind of outrun these Norskins. So in the tourney rules, we do have a couple of stipulations to prevent what we call draw kiting, which is basically where your opponent just outruns you the entire battlefield, or the entire battle until the timer runs out. And the way we handle that is that so long as the battle is going, both players have to be attacking. And what that means is both players somewhere on the battlefield have to be attacking or doing their best to attack enemy units. So the Wood Elves, for instance, here are fighting against this Marauder Chariot by basically surrounding it with these Glade Riders and doing their best to harm it, which they're not doing the best job. It is a fairly well-armored target, and of course, it does have the Berserk ability, so it gets stronger the longer it fights. But because it's completely surrounded like this, it's actually starting to take significant damage due to being fully surrounded, and because of that, its leadership gives out before its health does. And they're going to be able to chase that right off the battlefield, which is actually going to put the Norskins in a pretty tricky position. Because now what the Wood Elves can essentially do is what's called cycle charging. And what cycle charging essentially is you pull your unit back, cav unit, you charge into an infantry block to basically do a ton of damage and knock them all over, and then you withdraw before they have the time to heal. At this point, Orion is in a perfect position. He's regenerated enough health where the Cloak of Aisha is no longer active, and he's starting to throw spears at this Shaman Sorcerer, which is going to do tons of damage. And we see he's actually starting to break. So this actually could be a huge turnaround for the Wood Elves. I thought for sure the Norskins had it after they busted that front line open like a can of worms. But the balance of power is still a little shaky. As long as these Hagbane archers still have ammunition, basically what the Wood Elves are going to be able to do is only engage in favorable scenarios like this. They basically came in from behind, got a really big charge, and then are trying to get the hell out of dodge before these Fimir warriors can make contact. Which it looks like, I mean, the Fimir are going to be able to, with the help of the Norskins, are going to be able to drag down a couple of the Wild Riders who didn't get out in time. But of course, significant damage is being dealt across the Norskin line. We see the Hagbane archers, or Glade Riders, duking a beautiful charge against these Marauders and are actually going to break the unit, so they'll be able to run down the fleeing troops. Pretty much all that's left of the Norskin line is this pocket right here, and they need this Shaman Sorcerer to hold them steady. But Orion has got a bead on him, and Orion runs right in and is probably going to kill this guy in about 2 hits, if that. He does he does use the Hawk's Talon, which is the name of his bow, and it's going to come raining down here, perfect timing, and do a nice little chunk of damage to all of these. Oh, those are Marauder Champions. No wonder they're being so nasty. I thought those were regular Marauders. But Orion may have gotten way overzealous, because you can see he's completely surrounded again. The Cloak of Aisha has been popped, so he is resisting 50% of damage until he heals up above a certain threshold. But he is completely surrounded by just these terrifying Fimir warriors, the great weapons, who are perfectly designed to just beat the tar out of him unless something distracts them. And you do see the Wood Elf player, what the Wood Elf player is doing in response is he's charging in his Wild Riders and his Glade Riders, trying to basically pull the pressure off Orion. Unfortunately, though, these units are so weak. I mean, the Glade Riders actually just broke and ran due to the fear being caused by these Fimir warriors. And, oh my gosh, they club Orion right over the head and managed to knock him over. He's not dead, but he is wounded. That looked like it hurt. I don't know if y'all saw that. There was just an overhand, and he just ate, he just ate a giant ancient metal mace to the back of the head. So at this point, Orion pretty much just needs to duel it out. He is unbreakable, so he'll fight to the death. And he actually does manage to break one of the Fimir warrior units because they're terrified. So basically what terror is, if you're not familiar with the game, is units that cause terror, which are like the really spooky, scary units, like Orion here, because he's the king of the wood. He's kind of a magical, terrifying being. Terrify is basically an ability where units that can be terrified will basically get spooked and they'll run away for just a little bit. They'll come back fairly quickly so long as they're not being overly pursued. So you can see these Fimir have already rallied. But Orion is still eating a ton of damage, and the Fimir are continuing to just bash him over the skull. The archers, unfortunately, have ran out of ammo, so they can't provide any more support with those arrows in an attempt to cause panic among the Norskin lines while also doing damage. And this battle is literally coming down to the wire. The balance of power is still so significantly in favor of the Norskins, but Orion is designed to fight these large units like the Fimir. Like, he just kills one right there. He does significant anti-large and armor piercing, and he causes terror. So you see he terrifies this unit again. If these Wild Riders would actually turn around and come chase off these Fimir, the balance of power you see is starting to creep back in favor, and Orion's down to about 700 health. Ooh, that was a really nice hit from the Fimir. He's down to about 650. If he dies, the Wood Elves will instantly shatter. 500. Ugh, this is what it comes down to. It's going to be these ancient Cyclopean lizards versus Orion. It's just a battle of good and evil here. Oh, he actually manages to terrify them. Oh my gosh, this could be huge. So the Wild Riders are chasing off this unit, and even though they were just terrified, so long as they're being pursued, they will not rally. These Fimir were also terrified, but they do rally just because he wasn't actually able to get on them quick enough. But he's continuing to regenerate, and you see it's not a massive amount of regen. He's only getting a few ticks a second, but for every tick he gets makes such a big difference. The Fimir do break again, and that is game. So, a ridiculous battle that dragged on for so long. But due to the sheer just tenacity of Orion, and also only engaging when he had favorable matchups, he is going to be able to turn this around. Yeah, these are just regular Marauders. These are literally trash tier infantry. So they get terrified, and the Wood Elves have won. What a game. So the Wood Elves got a beautiful early game advantage by taking out Throg, the Troll King, who probably should have stayed in the back until the fire arrows were dealt with. Throg got chased off early game, but the Norskins immediately made up for it by tearing apart the Wood Elf army, literally ripping them apart limb from limb, making all of their infantry look like a joke. Tore them apart. The Fimir just smashed their way through every barrier. Chariots were chasing off units. It was beautiful. But then the Wood Elves, thanks to Orion just stubbornly holding the line, and Sarmatian making really, really good use of getting the heals, and then running away and using his spear to throw spears, do tons of damage. The Wood Elves literally used every single arrow and spear they had. They exhausted all their ammunition, and what a game. What a game. Those were two players you could tell were very evenly matched, but that unbreakable Lord in Orion using his terror to scare off these units just long enough that the Wood Elves could pursue them. Mwah, beautiful. What a great game. Woo! All right. Dang. So, that was excellent. So, let's update the roster real quick before I forget, because if I don't, I will. Roster. There we go. Whoops, I moved the wrong thing. There's no names on there. There we go. Let's move this down here. Much better. All right, so we have Sarmatian moving on to the semis. What a great game. That was an awesome, 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 awesome game. All right, and with that, let's do... we are off to the Tower of Hoeth. So now from Sylvania, it's time to go to Ulthuan, the magical island of the High Elves. If I can find it. I never remember if it's the Tower of Hoeth or... Oh, it's just Tower of Hoeth. I always forget. Alright. Let's remove... We can move the roster out of the way now. Boop. Hope everyone in Twitch chat's enjoying themselves. That was a killer game. It does not get much better than that. That was prime game. Prime game. Just a reminder in case anyone's joining us. My name is Loremaster of Sotek. You can find me over on YouTube or Twitch, now that I think about it. Twitch, I tend to do, like, just games for fun, but you can find me... Well, I do all games for fun. You can find me doing games that aren't Warhammer necessarily related on Twitch. But in any event, you can find me on YouTube or Twitch. I primarily work on Total War Warhammer, which is the game we're doing the tournament in today. It's very, very fun. It's got most of the factions in so far, and even some that didn't exist in Warhammer Fantasy, such as the Norskins, who we saw last game, and we even have the Vampire Coast, who we saw the game before that, who were not tabletop armies. They were armies you could kind of theme yourself around, but they didn't have full lists like they do in this game. So this game is not only Warhammer Fantasy, but it continues to expand on Warhammer Fantasy, which is just fantastic. Speaking of old favorites from Warhammer Fantasy, let's talk Tomb Kings. An army I very, very, very much hope get put into Age of Sigmar one day, but not today, sadly. Get on that, Games Workshop. In any event, so the Tomb Kings are going to be led by Pharaoh of War, and let's see what we've got here. We've got 2 units of basic skeleton warriors, 2 units of the more elite Tomb Guard. Then we've got a Necrotect leading 2 units of the Stone Ushabti, the animated statues of the gods. Leading the army, we've got Setra the Imperishable, the High King of Nehekara on his Cimmerian War Sphinx. We've got 3 units of Skeleton Spearmen, one of which is the Regiment of Renown King Nekesh's Scorpion Legion with their beautiful shields and darker themed colors, and they of course have poison attacks coming from their spears, which drip with scorpion venom. Then we've got 2 units of Tomb Scorpions, animated by the mummified remains of Lich Priests inside their cores. And I think that's it for the Tomb Kings. Wait, there's something hiding in that forest. What is it? Oh, it's some more spearmen. Okay. And against them, this is actually a grudge match. The Tomb Kings and the Vampire Counts hate each other. These are the biggest undead enemies that exist in any setting. Oh, yeah, there's Carrion too. You know, undead vultures. Everybody's favorite. So for the Vampire Counts, we've got 2 units of Vampiric Fellbats. Well, looks like we've got 1, 2... Maybe... Is it just 2? Nope, 3? 3 units? Or, well, I bet these are Graveguard, aren't they? Nope, so we got 3 units of Skeleton Warriors. 5 units of the most classic of zombies. We've got a Necromancer over here with Invocation of Nehek, Dance Macabre, and Raise Dead. We've got a Black Coach, probably my favorite of the Vampire Count units. It's just such a badass looking unit. Over here in the forest, we've got hidden among its trees 2 units of Blood Knights, some of the most elite cavalry in the game. All vampires, of course. Then we've got 2 Vargulfs here. 2 really, really big bat-wolf-bug hybrid things. Very, very heavily mutated vampires that are just terrifying. You can even see their bones showing. How delightful. And leading the army is, of course, the Meme Lord himself, the most hated and yet simultaneously beloved character in Warhammer Fantasy, Helman Gorst. And he's got all of his wonderful undead brothers, his actual brothers, who he's raised from the dead, because that's the best thing he could do, pulling his corpse cart for him. And then we've got a unit of Black Knights also here in the forest. Gorst, for anyone not familiar with Total War Warhammer, is literally the worst. He's just the worst. He's just the worst. He has a bad tendency of just kind of dying. Just about anything. Soothsayer, talk about the players a little bit. Pharaoh of War is a really, really great player, is in a lot of competitive tournaments. You can find him just all over the place. Plays very, very, very well. Tomb Kings are, of course, his main, as you can kind of tell by his name. He really likes that Egyptian theme. And Talaxlan Soothsayer, if I had to say who is the best player in Total War Warhammer, it's Talaxlan Soothsayer. He is terrifying. For the Everchosens, which are the really big, super important tournaments that we have in the Total War Warhammer community, officially hosted by Creative Assembly, usually 4 times a year. We've only had 4 so far, so shrug. But they're the super massive tournaments we have with huge prize pools and a lot of community events and lots of giveaways, and they're super duper fun. They last for 2 days. Or it lasts for 2 days. Soothsayer has won he won the second one and the most recent one, I believe. So the second one and the 4th one. But looks like our players are both ready, and they have begun. So neither of them brought any ranged troops. So it's kind of just going to be a slow march towards each other. Oh, look, there's another. So we have a unit of carrion here scouting out the forest. So despite Soothsayer's best efforts, Helman Gorst is not going to remain hidden for long. So Gorst has been spotted. And it looks like the Tomb Kings were kind of sticking close to the forest. More than likely, this is so that they could counter any cav or other fast-moving units that would try and take advantage of the forest on this beautiful map. That's the Tower of Hoeth, by the way. Very, very big. In any event, looks like the air battle has started. The Fellbats are going up against the Carrion. Both units have very, very high melee defense, which means they're kind of geared to just sort of tank and be annoying. We do see an Neru's Incantation of Protection coming in from Cetra the Imperishable on this unit, which will cut the damage they're taking about in half, but they are just horrendously outnumbered by bats. Like, they are just being torn apart. And the bats are doing a very, very good job of resisting any potential damage. So odds are that the aerial battle between all of the trash tier units is probably going to go in favor of the vampire counts. Though the Tomb Kings are not losing by a ton. It's kind of just raining undead bats and undead birds every once in a while. The Tomb Kings look like they're kind of trying to mirror the efforts of the vampire counts, trying to make sure they don't get outflanked. But this Vargulf is coming straight for these skellies, and oh, the spears were not braced. If a spear wall's not braced, then it might as well not be a spear wall. So he gets a couple of hits off, kills 5 guys, and then decides, alright, that's enough. So he's running away from the Ushabti, who did manage to activate their charge animation, but unfortunately didn't quite make them fast enough to catch the lumbering brute. Meanwhile, in the air, the first of the carrion units has died, but it looks like the Tomb Kings will account for themselves a little bit. This unit of Fellbats looks like they'll be joining the carrion in the near future. Granted, the Fellbats are not going to be immensely useful. Oh, a really nice charge here from the Black Coach, actually. He just smashes his way through. And there he goes again. So this guy is just kind of a Reaper of Souls who likes to casually ride around and just tear people up with a little ghost dude on front, ripping people up. And he actually manages to knock over Ushabti. And just before he's about to get countercharged, he manages to get the heck out of dodge. And a Black Coach is actually a very dangerous unit because the longer it's in combat, the stronger it gets as it feasts on the souls of those who are being murdered and just the natural energies going around the battlefield. And here we see all of the major charges are underway. The Blood Knights did come in here against these skeletons, but they're reinforced by the Ushabti and the Necrotect, who is providing buffs to all of these constructs. And it looks like they're going to go toe-to-toe against the big bat beasties themselves. We see a really, really nice Incantation of Desiccation coming down from the Tomb Kings, which is going to debuff all of these units. Helman Gorst is wading into battle against the Tomb Guard, the Skeleton Warriors, and this Tomb Scorpion, which are, of course, going to be nasty opponents. Meanwhile, Cetra here has got his construct into some loping action, and he's going to hop on this Vargulf. And the Vargulfs actually need to really stay away from Cetra, because Cetra has a magic weapon called the Blessed Blade of Patra, who's the sun god of Nehekara. And the nasty thing about sun gods is they tend to light your weapons on fire. And Vargulfs regenerate, which means they are not ideal for dealing with fire weapons. Fire weapons will ruin their days very quickly. The balance of power has already swung slightly in favor of the vampire counts, which is kind of amazing considering the fact that they're being led by Gorst. But of course, Sooth is a very good player, and this is actually a very good vampire count army. We do see the Blood Knights are doing everything in their ability to basically just keep continually cycle charging the front line of the Tomb Kings, and Gorst himself has gotten engaged in the battle against this Tomb Scorpion. But the nice thing about Helman Gorst is as long as he's in close combat, he basically, the engines of his corpse cart drain the life of all nearby targets. So not only is he constantly healing nearby allies, but he's doing damage, which is what this crazy effect is you see going off on all these units. So it looks like the front line of the vampire counts is pretty much gone. All of the zombies, but that's of course fine. Zombies are literally trash tier units. They're super duper cheap and they're not really worth anything. Meanwhile, we do see the first Realm of Souls has activated for the Tomb Kings. So when enough of their units die, basically they just kind of get a global heal that's very short but potent. The Black Knights are dueling against some of the flank units here, and the looks like the main battle is going to be in this big blob over here. We do see the Black Coach by this point has got 2 of his buffs just by running around and constantly cycle-charging into vampire accounts, or into Tomb Kings. And the Vargulf and these Blood Knights are just beating on this Tomb Scorpion. Which, of course, Tomb Scorpions are notoriously slippery for their ability to basically burrow underground, pop up, and just do lots of damage. And it looks like they're trying to get on this Necromancer and get rid of this support caster. Meanwhile, Cetra looks like he has fully turned his attention to Helman Gorst and is trying to get on him. Cetra, if he can get his Blessed Blade to activate... Oh, wow, that Vargulf just got punched. Cetra is more than capable of killing Gorst very, very quickly, which is why you see both of these Vargulfs are actually journeying in against Cetra. But these 2 Scorpions are just slapping these Vargulfs across the battlefield. Meanwhile, one of them has actually gone down due to sustained firepower. But the Tomb Kings, I think, have had enough. They've reached their final tier of the Ushabti summon and get another unit that raises out of the ground just in time to rear charge into Helman Gorst and do everything in their power to bring the Master Necromancer down. Meanwhile, Cetra is also trying to focus on Gorst while dealing with his Vargulf that keeps kind of slapping him in the rear, which nobody likes that. Nobody likes when a big old hulking monster comes around and gives you a slap on the back. It's just unpleasant. So, Gorst is starting to take damage, but so is Cetra. When units get attacked in the rear like this, it's really nasty because they just take so much damage because your melee defense gets cut in half, because obviously you're not going to be able to parry something very effectively that's coming from behind you. But the Vargulfs have done a substantial amount of damage to Cetra, though it looks like he's kind of broken away from them and is just kind of slapping poor Gorst very consistently. Meanwhile, it looks like both of the Vargulfs have hopped onto this Tomb Scorpion and are doing their best to get it off the field. Helman Gorst is actually being very, very tanky, considering that he's got Cetra the Imperishable wailing on him. Like, he's actually holding out really, really well, all things considered. The balance of power is significantly in favor of the vampire accounts by this point, which doesn't surprise me. Pretty much all of the Tomb King infantry is gone at this point. There's only 1 unit of Tomb Guards still holding, along with King Nikesh's Scorpion Legion. Meanwhile, the vampire accounts still have both of their Vargulfs, a fully powered Black Coach, and 2 units of Blood Knights. That is a ridiculous amount of very, very, very high tier units, who are all very expensive and count for a lot on the balance of power. Meanwhile, the only thing the Tomb Kings have left are 2 units of infantry, a single Tomb Scorpion that's about to go down, and a Necrotect who doesn't have any Ushabti left for him to support. So we do see that the Scorpion has lost its animated magics, and it has gone down, and now everything's coming in on Cetra. So I can't believe it, guys, but it looks like the Gorst is going to claim victory this day. Cetra is starting to completely fall apart. His army is shattered, and with that, he collapses, and so falls Cetra the Imperishable. Not so imperishable, is he? Alright, so great game to both players. The undead duel has ended in favor of the vampire counts, and a great game by both players. So, round of applause for both of them, of course. Let's go ahead and update the roster. And with that, we're actually done with the prelims. So, without any further ado, it is time. If I can find Soothsayer here. There he is. It's time to go on to the semifinals. Which I think for that, we're actually going to head into the land of the dwarves. Granted, we're heading into a little bit of a... It's kind of a wasteland map. But still a dwarvish map. So, for our next game, the first of the semifinals, we've got Hadries versus Outer Region. So we'll gather the players in here in just a moment. And then it's off to the semifinals. in case you're just now joining us, just going to reiterate, my name is Loremaster of Sotek. I am a content creator / whatever people call those these days, influencer / video game player, whatever. I make content on pretty much anything Warhammer Fantasy related, but primarily Total War Warhammer. But I also mix around. I have a YouTube and Twitch channel, which I am Loremaster of Sotek on both YouTube and Twitch. Feel free to check out my channel if you want to see more stuff related. I go by Loremaster of Sotek because what I guess you could say I'm famous for is I do extremely big deep dives on Warhammer Fantasy lore. I pride myself on doing the most in-depth lore videos you will ever find on Warhammer Fantasy, bar none. They're basically movies. Alright, so just in case you're just now joining us or maybe missed the matches earlier, let's go ahead and go over the armies again. So this is the semifinals, and like I said earlier, players have to keep the exact same list going into each match because it's just like you would experience going to a tabletop tournament. First, we've got 3 units of Centaurs with throwing axes on the Beastmen side. Then we've got Blackhorn's Ravagers, which are a Regiment of Renown Goreherd unit with their magic axes. And, well, I guess they're not technically magic, but they're fancy axes and black fur. Then we've got the Butchers of Kalkengard, which are a unit of cowhide regenerating beastmen. We've got Korok's Man-Rippers, which are a Regiment of Renown Bestigor unit, the most elite unit the beastmen have to offer. We've got the Eye of Morslib, which is a big old scary Cygor that hurls giant boulders at people. We've got a Bray Shaman of Death. 3 units of Ungor Spearmen. The army is being led by Morgur the Shadowgave. Where did he just go? There he is. Morgur the Shadowgave, who has regeneration, can summon Chaos Spawn, and all sorts of other nasty nonsense. Then on the far flanks, we've got 2 units of Chaos Warhounds, a regular one, and a poisonous one. Meanwhile, on the Dark Elf side, led by Hadries, we've got 2 units of Dark Elf Dread Spears, 2 units of Dark Elf Bleak Swords. We've got a Cauldron of Blood with the Death Hag. We've got the Chill of Sontar, the Regiment of Renown Ice Hydra. A unit of Cold One Knights. We've got the Sisters of Singing Doom, the Witch Elves who cause terror, which are of course excellent for basically being a hardcore taunt unit. We've got 3 units of Dark Riders with repeater crossbows, and leading the army, we've got old Morathy here, the Hag Sorceress herself, and she's got all of her items and all sorts of nasty spells. We've also then finally got a K-Knight Assassin, who brought both his Web of Shadows to deal pretty significant damage to low model count units, and then Assassin's Trophy, which lets him nerf enemy characters. So without further ado, let's get started. Alright, the battle has begun. The Beastmen, of course, thanks to the Eye of Morslib, do have a notable advantage when it comes to range. That was a good shot. 17 elves squished. Oh, that guy got back up. But 17 of them did not. Another beautiful shot. 15 this time. That guy got cut in half. So did those guys. So in any event, we do see that the Dark Elves here are trying to close the gap as quickly as elvenly possible. Meanwhile, the Eye of Morslib is doing his best to snipe out particular units. The repeater crossbows have jumped onto the... are shooting into Korok's Man-Rippers, which is a perfect unit for them to fire on. They are fairly heavily armored and are a very, very elite unit, so the Dark Elves definitely want to get rid of them as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, the Dark Elves are, the Beastmen are responding by, looks like they're getting a couple of small axes in the K-Knight Assassin, though that's not going to do a ton of damage. But okay, looks like they're focusing in on the Death Hag. So the Chill of Sontar does fire off his breath attack, gets a really, really nice crossfire, actually, hits the Centaurs and the Ungors, doing significant damage. Meanwhile, the Cygor is continuing to pelt the Sisters of Singing Doom while the Centaurs with throwing axes are trying to find a home. We do see an early Spirit Leech go down on Morothy, which will do excellent damage seeing as she's a single character, but she is going to respond with her wand, which is a Doom Bolt. Never mind, she decided not to use it. And it looks like she uses a Soul Stealer, and it's a really good Soul Stealer. She hits all 3 of the single entities on the Beastmen side, which is a really good catch. Over here, we do see that the battles between the Trash Tier Infantry has begun. Meanwhile, Morgur does run forward a little bit, but looks like he decides, maybe not, and falls back a bit. But he is being immediately reinforced by Blackhorn's Ravengers, who are much, much better at fighting. Chaos Spawn Summon does go down and immediately hops on the Sisters of Singing Doom. It's actually a really, really good matchup for them, primarily because they do really, really good damage, and they're poisonous. Not to mention, they're not actually worth anything to the Beastmen. This is a free unit. So they can chew a lot of these guys up and just do tons of damage for free, essentially, which is a great catch. Here we do see that the Chill of Sontar has gotten into the back line, but he is being countered by the Butchers of Kalkengard and Korok's Man Rippers, which are just designed to deal with him. And a Spirit Leech goes down, so he is taking tons of damage. Meanwhile, Morothy has definitely gotten way overzealous and is just getting circle beat by Morgur the Shadowgave and the Butchers of Kalkengard, who will be more than capable of tearing her up. Looks like she is about to pop a Soul Stealer, which will do significant damage to both of these units and will heal her, but I think it may be way too little, way too late. We do see the Chill of Sontar is trying to pull out of the fight, and he did get one of his, when one head falls, another takes his place, but he's being chased by a really, really elite unit. It's going to kind of make his day miserable. Meanwhile, wow, that Assassin just did a ton of damage to Morgur. Spirit Leech does go down on Morothy over there, and we see the Beastman front line is pretty much gone. Granted, it was made up of pretty much trash tier Ungor Spearmen, and the real fight's going to be back here with Morothy and the Chill of Sontar versus this Hydra. Oh, but really, really nice catch. So the Eye of Morsalib uses his special ability to actually, called the Gaze of Morsalib, to freeze the Chill of Sontar in place, removing his movement, which is actually going to make the Hydra start just running for the hills, and he's basically a dead man walking. Meanwhile, we do see that the Cold One Knights over here are dueling the Eye of Morsalib, which is a really, really good matchup for him, though, and they're even getting supported by Repeater of Crossbow Fire and the Wand of Kaloth, which is going to come down to a significant amount of damage. Really, really good catch for them. Meanwhile, the Butchers of Kalkengard look like they have finally noticed with Korok's Man Rippers are... So Morothy gets tossed, and she's probably going to be dead in a few seconds. And with her gone, Dark Elf leadership is pretty much going to fall to the K-Knight Assassin and the Death Hag at this point. But there's no way Morothy's getting out of that. Sure enough, she is dead. Meanwhile, though, the Chill Sontar did get another one of his head heals. So he is back in fairly good shape, and it looks like he's coming this way to try and deal with that Bray Shaman of Death. Meanwhile, in the main source of the battlefield, we see that the Centaurs with throwing axes are focusing all of their attention on the Death Hag, which is really, really good. She, of course, was instrumental in granting the Dark Elves their win against the Lizardmen. Meanwhile, Morgur, although he has taken a fair amount of damage, he does transform the unit beating on him into Chaos Spawn and is being protected by Blackhorn's Ravengers. So he's in very, very healthy shape. The Death Hag has broken at this point, and so the only leadership structure left was the K-Knight Assassin, who is apparently dead. I'm guessing Morgur probably killed him. Chill of Sontar does manage to deal with the Death Wizard, but the Centaurs with throwing axes are chasing after the Death Hag and will have no problem hunting her down and finishing her off. Meanwhile, the Repeater Crossbows are doing everything in their power to counteract the Centaurs with throwing axes, but they're just significantly outnumbered at this point, and the only thing holding the Dark Elf army together now is the Chill of Sontar, who is a very, very good unit, but he's not a leadership structure. So with the balance of power as heavily as it is against the Dark Elves, if they get a nice charge against the Chill of Sontar, that is going to be game. And sure enough, we do see a ton of units are coming in here from all angles. The Chill of Sontar, though, is not going to go out without a fight and actually manages to kill a significant amount of Korok's Man Rippers. And that is game. So great game to both players. Very fast, very brutal. Of course, that's what's so nice about the Eye of Morsalib, is that he forces your opponent to just run at you as fast as you can. So because of that, Hadri's was not able to take advantage of his Dark Riders with Repeater Crossbows. You know, in the Lizardman game, we saw he actually used these to fairly good effect to kind of have a really solid skirmish early game. And if it weren't for the Eye of Morsalib, these Dark Riders are actually more than capable of out-trading the Centaurs, so long as they have decent protection. But the Eye of Morslib dictated the pace of the battle, and because of that, the Dark Elves just weren't able to take advantage of that early skirmish game, and that cost them the match. Plus, I think Morthing got a little overextended. But great game to both players. That's the first of the semifinals match over. It was a bloody. So now, we're off to the final semi-match play. So congrats to Outer Region. So now we've got Sarmatian versus Flaxland Soothsayer. And we're going from the realms of the Dawi to the land of Karl Franz, the Empire, the main characters. We're going to go to the Altdorf outskirts. And it's going to be Wood Elves versus the Vampire Counts. Which, based on the fact that it's Helman Gorst, and based on the fact there are Wood Elf archers that have fire arrows, I don't think this is going to be too great for Gorst, but we'll see what happens. I might be surprised. But we can go ahead and take a moment here to say, if you're joining us on Twitch or on Steam, which once again, on Twitch, just for today, you can find us at The Skull Throne is the name of the Twitch channel if you want to join the chat and be able to, interact and have fun and stuff. We've got 2 games left for today. The only games left are this one and then the finals. But in any event, we've got... my name is Loremaster of Sotek. I am a massive Warhammer Fantasy fan. Of course, most IPs that Games Workshop does, as well as most IPs that Creative Assembly does. You can find me over on YouTube or Twitch at Loremaster of Sotek. The thing that I guess I would say I'm quote-unquote famous for is that when it comes to Warhammer Fantasy, you will not find anybody who does more in-depth lore videos than me. I like to do focuses on characters and regions and religions and gods and all sorts of other crazy stuff, and we do Q&As and live streams and playthroughs and yada 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 yada. But if you ever want to know the nitty-gritty details about your favorite characters or all sorts of crazy stuff like that, then come check us out. But in any event, today we are, of course, hosting, thanks to Creative Assembly and for allowing me this time slot, and thanks, of course, to Games Workshop for having the Skulls for the Skull Throne event in the first place. But you can, this is my, what are known as my tabletop series, aka my... this is my tabletop series, also known as the Challenge of the Old Ones. This tournament format I host usually every Friday. As you can tell, this week we're doing it on Sunday due to the special event. But anyway, let's go ahead and hop into the final semifinals match. Khorne has harvested many skulls today, so let's see who's going to harvest some more. I'm really curious to see who's going to get to sit on the Skull Throne today. So whoever wins this is going to go up against Outer Region's Beastmen, which is going to be pretty exciting. Alright, in case you missed the earlier matches, we'll go ahead and go over the lists again, just because they have to take the same list every game. That's part of the format. So for the Wood Elves, led by Sarmatian, we got 2 units of Glade Riders with Hagbane tips, which are poisonous magic arrows, which poison does substantial debuff. Then we've got 2 units of Wild Riders, fairly elite damaging cavalry. Not a lot of armor, but very deadly on the charge. For magic for the Wood Elves, we have a Branch Wraith, a Tree Spirit caster. She has Earth Blood for healing and Withering for debuffs. Then we have 3 units of Glade Guard, 2 of which have Hagbane tips for poisonous magic damage, and 1 of which has Starfire shafts, which do fire damage. We've got a single unit of War Dancers, a single unit of Dryads. Then we've got, I believe, 5 units. Yep, 5 units of Eternal Guard, which are fairly decent spearmen. They have pretty high leadership, and they have armor piercing, which for low tier spears is pretty awesome. And then leading the army, the absolute MVP of the day so far is Orion, the King in the Woods. The magical, spooky elf lord himself. I guess he's not technically an elf, he's more like a demigod. But in any event, for the vampire counts, we've got 3 units of basic skeleton warriors. Then we've got 5 units of just the most basic zombies you can possibly imagine. 2 Vargulfs. We've got 2 units of Blood Knights, the super high elite tier anti-large cav. For Lordship, we've got Helman Gorst, the meme lord himself, on his Brother's Gorst corpse cart. That's almost hard to say. Then we've got a Necromancer on a undead horse with Invocation of the Heck, Raise Dead, and Van Hal's. Oh, Gorst actually has no magic. I just realized that. That's super funny. But of course, he does have a lot of really, really powerful passive buffs thanks to his corpse cart. We've got 3 units of Fell Bats up in the skies, which could be really, really nasty for those archers. They're not very good fighters, but they're excellent at just interrupting. And then last, but one of my favorites, we've got the Corpse Cart. Corpse Cart. The Black Coach. There we go. Not the Corpse Cart. The Black Coach. Alright, and without further ado, let's begin. Alright, so we're of course fighting in the Altdorf outskirts, so you can see the grand city of Altdorf over here, the capital of the empire, with their giant, massive city. It's beautiful, isn't it? Not sure why these two would be fighting outside of it, but let's not worry about that. Alright, so it looks like we've got the Glade Riders, the Hackbane Tips, going in for some early damage. And the Vampire Counts are, of course, using a lot of these really low-tier infantry to basically just act as a screening force against these Archer Legions. Just to make sure that they don't have to deal with taking any nasty early damage on the likes of Helman Gorst. Though, the Archers do focus the Fellbats, which, of course, are a significant priority target for them. And Fellbats have terrible leadership, so if they actually take sustained fire, they do not have a good time. They actually manage to dodge a fair amount of those shots, but they still lose a couple guys before the Hagbane Tips start reverting into the Skeleton Warriors, but that's fine by the Vampire Counts. Of course, they can, they can't heal their troops, and the Skeleton Warriors are actually very, very well designed to deal with stuff like that, because they do have shields. Meanwhile, Helman Gorst is eating a little bit of ranged fire. He's not the best against ranged fire. He does have a little bit of missile resistance and basically no armor. He only has 45, which is very, very low. But he does regenerate, so he'll continue putting his health back together over time. We do see these Fellbats move forward a little bit, probably just trying to act as a distraction to lower the pressure off Gorst. And meanwhile, it looks like the rest of the Wood Elf army is now in range. We see a really, really nice charge coming in here from the Wild Riders, which absolutely just smashes these Skeleton Warriors apart, doing tons of health damage, killing 15 models, and then they skip the hell out of there, just doing their charge damage and then moving out. Over here, we do see the Black Coach runs forward. It looks like he was likely going for a nice early charge, but he is taking so much damage. He does get a nasty little poke in the flank there by Orion, but I'm assuming he moved forward to try and bait the shots out. But he needs to get the heck out of there. Oh my gosh, he's like below half health now. We do have both of the Vargulfs loping their way in, likely heading for those archers as quickly as possible. Bats have engaged all along the line, and here we see the real power of this army. The Blood Knights have charged in all across the battle line, and they're just looking for catches. So the Wild Riders did manage to lure them into a group of Eternal Guard, but Blood Knights are still super dangerous, even against spearmen like this. We do see a nice Earthblood go down from the Branch Wraith, who overcasts it to make it a little bit more powerful. So these units are going to recover a fair amount of the health they just lost. Meanwhile, the Necromancer, it looks like he's probably riding, hopefully to support this Black Coach, which is of course taking a substantial amount of damage. We do have another unit of, we do have the unit of Black Knights back here that I missed earlier, riding in, hopefully to provide support. The Wild Riders do come in with a really nice surround on this Vargulf, and the Black Coach is gone! So the Black Coach does get destroyed by shooting. But these Blood Knights do get a really, really nice rear charge into this little force over here, supporting the Vargolf, though they are eating Hagbane tips to the back, which is not fun. Looks like we're about to have the Hounds of Orion come out. Unfortunately, they kind of go the wrong direction. And it looks like they're actually doing a substantial amount of damage to the archers as well, which is unfortunate. Helman Gorst has engaged in melee over here, so he's going to be constantly draining these units. But unfortunately for him, that zombie unit just died, so Gorst is totally by himself, which is not great. Hopefully he can, like, get a summon to help him out. In any event, there's pretty much mass chaos all over the battlefield. The Vampire Count front line is pretty much gone at this point. But they have managed to infiltrate the back line and are doing pretty substantial damage. One of the archer units has been pretty heavily shut down. Looks like the Blood Knights are trying to get a nice charge on these Wild Riders here, but they are being... Oh, they do get it. Sarmatian... man, Sarmatian is having to micro so many things at once, which is so difficult. Controlling all these different units, while Soothsayer kind of has the aggressive advantage here because his units are notably more high tier. The Black Knights do see off these Wild Riders, so they're pretty much off the battlefield. These Glade Guard with Hagbane tips have broken and are running. Back here, the Glade Riders and Hagbane tips are trying to stay safe. This other unit of Wild Riders does get caught out by the Blood Knights, and so does the unit of Hagbane tips. That is a really, really nice catch from the Vampire Counts, catching two really critical units here. And you can see the Vampire Counts are sort of moving a death blob across the battlefield. They do have Gore sort of dueling these Eternal Guard over here, which they're actually probably going to have a hard time dealing with him. They don't have the highest melee attack, and he has actually surprisingly good melee defense. So he'll hold out for a while, especially because he's constantly regenerating and constantly draining their health as long as he's in combat. So he's kind of a nasty stickler, but Orion does run in there, and Orion will kill him super quickly. However, Gorst is kind of a red herring for this army. Like, he doesn't really matter. Sure, he's their general, so he provides some substantial leadership buffs, but the real core of the Vampire Count army is this. Their caster, who is, of course, the regular Necromancer, the double unit of Blood Knights, the Black Knights, and then the double Vargolfs. These are the heavy-hitting, important units in this faction. Gorst is just kind of there for flavor, but he doesn't actually really do anything. Other than, like, kind of some nice support. But this army doesn't even have elite infantry, so he's not really supporting anything important. We do see that a Invocation of the Heck does go down on Gorst, trying to buy him some time, while the Vargolfs do run in on Orion and actually manage to knock him over. The Vampire Counts need to get back on these Fire Archers and take them out. If they can actually take out these Fire Archers, I think Gorst will survive. We do see that the Dryads here are tearing apart these Skeleton Warriors, though they are being supported by the Necromancer. And just when the Dryads think they finally got this under control, they're going to get charged in the butt by a bunch of Blood Knights, who are going to pretty much instantly shred them. Meanwhile, the Cav is continuing to run around, have a good time. Gorst has healed a substantial amount of health and is now nice and healthy. Meanwhile, the Blood Knights are going straight for Orion's face. They get a really, really nice charge in, are doing tons and tons of damage. Though he does call down a Hawk's Talon, but Soothsayer, having his masterful micro, not only dodges it, but manages to lure in these Eternal Guards, so they take the damage instead. All the sad face. In any event, both of the Vargolfs, or this Vargolf over here is actually very, very wounded, likely due to sustained archer fire, but the other one has claimed vengeance and is absolutely slapping these Glade Guard into oblivion. At this point, the balance of power is a little bit in favor of the Vampire Counts, who are popping off a very nice Overcast Invocation of the Heck to heal all of these units so that they can take out this one of these Eternal Guard units, which are, of course, a pretty critical crux at this point in the battle. The Branch Wraith is managing to sustain this part of the battlefield using her Earth Blood, which is going to give some really, really nice heals. But the Dryads do fall apart. The Eternal Guard are going to be quick to join them. They are fighting in a forest, so they do actually have some significant penalties. But, oh, very, very nice charge from Talaxel and Soothsayer into the rear of these Eternal Guard. They weren't braced, so they didn't have their charge defense, and they're just kind of going to get torn apart. Meanwhile, Orion does go for a Hounds of Orion, but the Blood Knights are quick to get the heck out of dodge. And Orion over here is dueling this Vargolf, and you can see he's actually putting a whooping on it. The Vargolf's leadership is very, very low, though he does quickly manage to disengage and get into a more favorable position. Over here, we do see the Eternal Guard are trying to get into a reasonable battle formation against this horde of Blood Knights that comes charging in. Very, very nice Earthblood, not Overcast, but regular Earthblood goes down, healing all 3 of these units. Orion is, of course, going to be fighting his hardest against these guys, and he has very, very good anti-large armor piercing, so he will do significant damage to whoever he's targeting, but he does need to be wary of these double Vargulfs. Meanwhile, Helman Gorst comes waddling into the battle at his just glacial pace. But as long as he's in battle, he's going to be doing a drain effect on all of these units, which will do substantial damage to them, which is really, really powerful. The only thing he really needs to avoid is Orion, who's of course now getting bullied by the Vargulfs, because they know Orion's going to focus on Gorst trying to get rid of him. Meanwhile, while all these units are distracted, really, really nice charge comes in from all of these different Blood Knight units. Another Earthblood goes down, but unfortunately, despite the Branch Wraith support, all of these units start to break and run. And even though the Branch Wraith is providing some really nice heals and melee attack bonus with her Howl of the Forest, pretty much the entire Wood Elf army just collapses in on itself. And the only thing left standing is Orion, which is a very similar situation to where we were last game. But unlike last game, there is plenty of bullies here left to just make his day terrible. And Sooth continues to have excellent micro, getting out just in time to avoid that Hawk's Talon, and then cycle charging all of his troops immediately back into Orion from all sides. Orion just elbows that one Vargulf in the face. But nonetheless, Orion's not going to be able to hold out. This is just a ridiculous amount of sustained damage. Plus, the Corpse Card is buffing the stats of all of these troops and healing them. So Orion just doesn't have a realistic way to deal with this. And with that, the balance of power turns against the Wood Elves. Orion's the only thing left standing because he's unbreakable. And with a nice stab in the back, that's gonna be game. So Soothsayer taking what most people, and I'm not saying this from my perspective, I'm saying this from a literal global perspective, the most hated lord in the game, because most people just think he's just garbage. Helman Gorst has achieved victory yet again. Sooth is just scary. So even though Sarmation pulled it back earlier with easily the best game we've seen today, unfortunately it just wasn't quite enough to take on the king. And with that, it is time for the finals. So in just a moment, or just a few minutes rather, we will know who is going to sit on the Skull Throne and bask in all of Khorne's glory. So without further ado, let's get into it. And for the final map, we're actually going to go to my favorite map. We're going to go to the jungles of Lustria. A little map called Storm Demon. From the most recent DLC, in fact. Prophet and the Warlock, which is fucking amazing. Good. It's very amazing. In any event, when both players are ready, we'll hop into it. Hope everyone out there is having an excellent day. This has been a lot of fun. Last time I'm gonna, well, probably saying the last time I'll go through this. My name is Loremaster of Sotek. You can catch me on YouTube or on Twitch or on Twitter. I'm also on Twitter now that I think about it. I focus primarily on Warhammer Fantasy and all the lore behind it, which is where the name comes from. But I also focus on Total War games and, of course, just stuff that I like to play for fun. We here at the Total War Warhammer community, we have a lot of amazing content creators who do all sorts of crazy things, from multiplayer campaigns to single player campaigns to multiplayer tournaments, and of course just the multiplayer scene in general. We've got amazing creators like Turin, Italian Spartacus, Janet on Occasion, Heir of Carthage, Dov Plays, ND Pride. Like, there's a ton of us, and it's super fun. It's a very intermixed community, lots and lots of people. There's a lot of hype and fun. We have massive tournaments. We've had 4 so far in about the last year. And it's a great community. And it's a great place to be and just enjoy the setting. All right. And with that, once both players are ready, we will hop into the finals. And we are doing great on time. We have just enough time for one more game. Where is Sooth? Wonder if he went to get a drink of water or something real quick. In any event, I hope you all enjoyed it. I don't know what's after this. Something's after this. I don't know what, but something. But once again, thank you very, 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 very much to Creative Assembly for allowing me to have this time slot. And thanks again to Games Workshop, A, for all the amazing things you do in giving us stuff like Warhammer Fantasy in the first place. And B, for having the Skulls for the Skull Throne event so we could have all these awesome deals and yada, yada, yada for all of the crazy Warhammer themed or Games Workshop IP products that are out, which it's a pretty good time to be a Games Workshop fan. Uh-oh. I hope Sooth didn't, like, fall down a well or something. All right. There we go. Time for the finals. Beastmen versus Vampire Counts. And thanks to everyone who joined me today. We've had a lot of people in Twitch. It's been great to see everybody. I see a lot of familiar faces, a lot of familiar names. I appreciate you all coming out. For anyone that missed any of the tournament and wants to catch the whole thing, as soon as the stream is over, I will get the video rendered and set up, and I will toss it onto my YouTube channel so everybody that missed it can watch it. So yeah, without further ado, welcome to Storm Demon. So we're in the jungles of Lustria, where you can see a great Lizardman city over here in the background, but it's raining warpstone meteors. And if you want to know why, you'll have to get the game. And the Prophet in the Warlike DLC. Think about it. But in any event, in case you're just now joining us, let's go ahead and go over the armies one last time. So for the Beastmen, we've got 3 units of Centaurs with throwing axes, 2 units of Chaos Warhounds, 1 regular and 1 with poison, 3 units of Ungor Spearmen. Leading the army, we've got Morgur the Shadow Gave, the regenerating Nightmare of Chaos, who has the ability to summon Chaos Spawn and turn a nearby heavily wounded unit into a unit of Chaos Spawn once per battle. Then we have Blackhorn's Ravengers over here, the Regiment of Renown Gorher with Shield. We've got the Butchers of Kulkan Guard, a Minotaur Cowhide Minotaur unit with regeneration. We've got the Korax Man Rippers, who are the most elite infantry, heavy infantry available to the Beastmen. Very, very good against large targets or armored targets. The big boy for the army is the Cygor, the massive Cyclopean rock-chucking beast boy, cowboy, whatever you want to call him. And then we've got a Bray Shaman of Death with Spirit Leech and Fate of Biuna to nuke units or characters. Meanwhile, on the Vampire Count side, we've got 3 units of Fellbats for harassment, 3 units of Skeleton Warriors, some nice basic tier infantry. Then we've got 5 units of Zombies, which are literally just goofy meat shields. They don't really do anything. They're just super duper cheap and get in the way. Then we've got 1 unit of Black Knights here, which are probably, I would consider them medium tier heavy cav. 2 units of Blood Knights, which are probably one of the strongest heavy cav units in the game. Very, very good against enemy large targets. 2 Vargulfs, which are basically just giant bullies. They're very, very quick, and they're very, very good at smashing on individual targets. We've got a Black Coach, which is a chariot unit that's very, very good for harass, and he gets stronger the longer he's in combat. And then leading the army, we've got a regular Necromancer here on a Undead Steed, who's got all of the spells with Invocation of the Heck, Van Hale's Dance Macabre, and Raise Dead. And last but not least, well, probably least, we've got Helman Gorst, who is the Lord leading this faction, the Master Necromancer himself from the Grim and the Grave DLC, on his Brother's Gorst Corpse Cart. And he does not have any spells, but he does have the Liber Noctis, which allows him to regenerate magic. And then he has a ton of support abilities. He buffs the fighting stats of all nearby units. He heals all nearby units substantially. He also damages all enemy units so long as he's in close combat. And he can regenerate magic for his faction while damaging himself. Pretty cool character, actually. And without further ado, it's go time. Alright, so the battle has begun, and already we see the Centaurs with throwing axes hurtling forward to get involved in the fight. And they do need to be very, very wary of these Fellbats. If they get caught out by these Fellbats and countercharged by Blood Knights, they are doomed. We do see the Fellbats are already jumping on them, but it looks like the Chaos Warhounds are quick to respond. And it looks like they not quite catch that unit. Meanwhile, the Eye of Morslib is just kind of waiting for somebody to come in range, and chuck! And that's going to hit a zombie unit and probably do a lot of damage, but zombies, you know, who cares? Yep. This is where the real meat is. So we do see the throwing axes are doing a little bit of harassment damage to the Fellbats, and getting rid of the Fellbats is probably the most important thing that the Beastmen can do at this point. If the Fellbats get chased off the battlefield, then the Beastmen actually have a nice chance to keep the throwing axes alive and keep their harassment game busy, because this death blob here is so scary strong, it's just ridiculous. Because basically what the vampire counts are relying on is just a garbage front line that doesn't really do anything well. It just has a lot of health, but that's pretty much it. Here we do see that Outer Region is having a little bit of trouble keeping up with Laxland Soothsayer's micro. He is just kind of running for the hills. He almost gets caught out here by the Svargulf, but does manage to kind of keep running away. One of the Fellbat units is about to completely crumble down to dust. The second unit here will probably start to get focused. Cygor is continuing to just pelt people with rocks. And probably the sooner he starts focusing on... I don't know. I don't even know what the Cygor is going to be able to focus on. The Cygor is almost a liability at this point. Because he's not really well designed to focus down single targets. You know what? Actually, focusing down the Blood Knights would probably be the best thing, because that boulder will do a ton of damage to Blood Knights. Here we do see the Black Knights are riding in, trying to get a good charge in on these Hounds, which they will get, which is going to pretty much instantly deal with these Hounds. But the Beastmen do have aid arriving to try and deal with this kind of massive horde here. But before the... Oh, wow, that's a really good Raise Dead. So the Necromancer does summon a unit of zombies beneath the Butchers of Kalkengard and Karex Manrippers to basically just tie them up in battle. And you can just see Sooth is just waiting back there for a moment to charge in his Black Knights and just tear people up. The Cygor does chuck a rock into the Black Knights, but I just wouldn't focus the Black Knights. They're just not a priority at the end of the day. The Blood Knights are where the money's at. These are the guys that need to go down. But still a nice rock. At this point, we do see that the Blood Knights do commit to the fight, and they charge into the Butchers of Kalkengard, which is going to do so much damage. But the Beastmen are able to counter with a really powerful Fate of Buna, which is, of course, one of the strongest spells in the game. It's very, very expensive to cast, but sweet lord does it do damage. Of course, Soothsayer, being the micro god that he is, does instantly counter with an upgraded Invocation of the Heck, which isn't enough to quite counter. Oh, that was a beautiful boulder right into the center of that pocket. The Invocation of the Heck, though, will last a fair amount of time. And, oh, there's actually a follow-up Spirit Leech. Unfortunately, the Spirit Leech is cast on the wrong unit. He wanted to cast it on the 36-man unit, not the 41 one. But another nice boulder goes in. And if those boulders can keep up consistently, they can actually kill these Blood Knights and just do crazy amounts of damage. Meanwhile, over here, we do see Morgur is kind of single-handedly fighting off Gorst and this little army, which he is capable of doing, though it is a dangerous... he does need to be careful. He probably won't take any damage. He'll just sit there forever. The Vargos at this point are committing into their fight against the Eye of Morslib, which they're actually very, very well kitted for. However, the Chaos Spawn are summoned up to help defensively. They are a very dangerous counter to these Vargulfs thanks to their poison, and they just attack very, very fast and are very, very mean. We do see Blackhorn's Ravagers charging in. The Cygor is wailing on the Vargulf with his boulder. The Beastmen need to win this engagement. They cannot afford to lose this pocket here. They need to get these Centaurs with throwing axes over here and just start pelting people. If the Beastmen lose this engagement, they are really, really SOL. We do see that the Master Necromancer looks like he's trying to duel the Brave Shaman of Death. He is on a steed, so he's capable of knocking him over, though he does need to be careful, because the Brave Shaman of Death is actually a very, very good combatant. The Necromancer is actually taking some substantial damage, and the Beastmen do manage to win this little pack here. Morgar is doing a hilariously good job at soloing the zombies by himself. The Cygor is continuing to throw boulders. He's secured about 64 kills here. A fair amount of which is actually Blood Knights, who of course are being massively healed thanks to the Master Necromancer's Master of Death ability and the Corpse Card if they can get in range. Oh, that boulder unfortunately does get a miss. Still tons of zombies flooding in. And we do see the Black Coach is actually getting focused down very, very heavily by the Beastman, which is a pretty good choice. He is at max tier now, so he has substantial damage resistance and is overall kind of a nuisance to deal with. If they could get him off the battlefield just so he's... Because you can tell most of the Beastman line is gone. And it's probably because this Black Coach has just been riding around yee-hawing, destroying people. The Eye of Morslib is trying to stay unengaged because if he's stuck in combat like he is right now, he can't actually throw boulders. And he is substantially worse as a melee fighter than a ranged fighter. Over here, we do see that the Black Coach... Oh, beautiful! Gets in range of an Overcast Invocation of the Heck, which can only affect 4 targets. So Sooth, being the just brilliant son of a gun that he is, moves in exactly 4 of his highest tier units and gets off a really, really powerful overheal. So Sooth is just killing it right now. And the Centaurs are running out of throwing axes, and those throwing axes are the only reliable thing they have to deal with, like the Black Coach and these Vargulfs and even the Blood Knights. So the Blood Knights now are pulling back around Gorst, who is of course constantly healing them, and he actually heals them frighteningly fast because he has his Corpse Cart regen aura and he has Master of the Dead. And the scary thing about Master of the Dead in particular is that Master of the Dead... oh, well, yeah, it just heals really fast. It's kind of the thing. So those stacking together is going to get a ton of heals. The Centaurs are continuing to throw axes into the Black Coach, which at this point is probably kind of a lost cause because the Black Coach is negating about 44% of all damage it takes since it's reached its max tier. So I really don't think there's anything the Beastmen can do at this point, guys. I think Gorst is about to win this tournament. But you see the Vargulf does slap the Eye of Morslib, but gets knocked back for his trouble. But, I mean, the Beastmen are just totally overwhelmed at this point. I do not see a way at all that they can turn this around. Morgar has already used both of his summons, so he's out of summons. The throwing axes are pretty much all out of ammunition. I mean, there's 2 units left with barely anything. Gorst is still practically at max health and is just pumping magic into this faction. And despite the fact that Soothsayer took the worst legendary lord in the game, at least in the common mind, Sooth, I'm sure, is... I think Soothsayer has virtually everybody sitting on their couch right now that plays this game in the multiplayer scene going, wait, is Gorst actually good now? Because, God, what a just a... Like, he's not even using him as a wizard. He's literally just using him as a battery to generate tons of magic and just... Oh, gosh, it's just scary. Using the Necromancer hero as another heal battery, but more importantly as the actual wizard while staying very, very mobile, and using Gorst as just like a juicy, juicy target is just brutal. At this point, the only thing the Beastmen really have left that's of any value is the Eye of Morslib and Morgar. But they are surrounded. Granted, it's by very, very terrible infantry that will not... This infantry could wail on these two for all day and it would not do anything. But the Vargulf, on the other hand, will definitely do something given enough... will definitely do something over time. And Gorst is actually... And you gotta remember, as long as Gorst is in combat, he's just constantly draining health away from these guys. And because of that constant health drain, which you can see is like all the way over here, the Eye of Morseliv and Morgar are just steadily taking ticks and ticks and ticks of damage. And the Centaurs have been made to completely fall back. They're just being harassed and chased by Blood Knights. Meanwhile, Helman, Gorst, and the Vargolf are continuing to just beat on the Cygor, while the Necromancer is supporting all this stuff over here. This goofy black coach is still riding around, riding dirty, as Turden would say, just being a menace to all of society. And with that, the balance of power looks like it's going to completely collapse in, and I can't believe it, Gorst won! So, despite everything I thought I knew about this game, Flaxland Soothsayer took a tournament-legal Helman Gorst build and won. Against a lot of really good players, many of which were taking really, really nasty lists. So he did it. The madman did it. Damn. Well done. Well done. Great job, Flaxland Soothsayer. So, without further ado, Khorne's champion has been selected. Flaxland Soothsayer once again proving how he is the king, the king of Total War Warhammer 2 multiplayer, whether he's memeing or not. In any event, thank you all so much for joining me. I gotta wrap this up and get out of here because we're pretty much out of time. We literally got it exactly at 2 hours, so good job us. For the last time, my name is Loremaster of Sotek. You can find me on YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter. If you enjoyed the tournament, please come by my YouTube channel. We do tournaments like this every Friday, and it's a ton of fun. We have all sorts of different people who bring all sorts of crazy builds, and the meta is constantly shifting. It's really goofy. And if you've never checked out Total War Warhammer, I encourage you to check it out. To see like some of the best games there are, you can literally just Google the Everchosen tournament, which is when we get the best and brightest famous players together from the multiplayer community, and they hash it out over 2 days of grueling games, and it's a super fun event where a lot of memes are born, and it's just crazy. But in any event, thank you again so much for watching. I gotta get out of here. Thanks to Creative Assembly for giving me the time slot and making such an amazing game. Thanks again to Games Workshop for having the Skulls for the Skull Throne event and allowing all these awesome companies to use their IP to make so many amazing games that we all love. So without further ado, thanks for watching, guys. Catch you next time.